Today I did the first day of the two-day Management 3.0 course, and tomorrow is the next day. And you get sort of the condensed version, as Alexei said. That's nice. You get a quick recap in 50 minutes, more or less, of what I talked about in 2 days. So you get basically all the important stuff, and you don't have to pay anything for it. Isn't that amazing? Awesome. Yeah, basically you have a bad deal, don't you think? You could have just gone here. Yeah, that's not bad. That's too late now. Alright. Management 3.0 in 50 minutes. Let's see if I can pull that off. I wrote this book, Management 3.0, 2 years ago. And it is about the role of the manager in agile organizations. And people ask me sometimes, why do you call it 3.0? Well, that's a very good question. I see bureaucratical, hierarchical forms of organization as management 1.0. Command and control, we use that term quite often for such organizations, where everything is decided at the top, and the only way to grow your career is to climb the corporate ladder upwards, get closer to the CEO. That's 1.0. And it doesn't work that well. Actually, there's plenty of research out there that says that it is a bad form of organization. There's just been new reports released, for example, that 50 or 60% of the people in the world hate their jobs. They just don't like their jobs. That is a lot of people who do not like their jobs. And I believe bureaucratical, hierarchical management is in large part responsible for that. 2.0, Management 2.0 is all the attempts at making it work better. We had theory of constraints, business process reengineering, Six Sigma, 7 habits of highly effective people, good to great, lots of ideas, theories, books, etc. that try to do something about it, have the organizations work better. But usually not really succeeding. And I think that in large part that's because they still use the hierarchical form of management, the top-down form of management. It is like adding new features on an architecture that's bad. It doesn't work well. You need a new architecture of the organization. I believe you have to see it as a network. It's not a hierarchy, it's a network of people working together. It's a complex system. I will talk about that in a moment. So that's why I call it 3.0. It's a new architecture. And then the old and the other features that we tried before, they still can work if we sometimes tweak them a little bit to fit the new architecture. I will give you some examples of that. Another reason I call it 3.0 is so that software developers would buy the book, because they want version numbers on everything, right? So that's why it is Management 3.0. Otherwise, software developers wouldn't take it seriously. All right. Benefits obtained from implementing Agile. We are here at a session organized by Agile Latvia. They do that for good reasons. They believe in Agile. And according to this research by version 1, the State of Agile Survey, these are the benefits that you can obtain from Agile. This is from people who actually reported this as a benefit when they became Agile organizations. Managing change, for example, or better project visibility, happier teams, improved team morale, happier people, but also accelerated time to market, release things faster. All these are benefits, and different organizations probably enjoy different benefits. That's fine. For example, in my organization, where I worked for 7 years until I quit my job 1.5 years ago, we needed a better development process. Actually, we did not have a development process. We had chaos. So we needed something to give us a bit more structure. And Scrum and Agile helped us with that. And we also needed a bit of reduced risk, because things were blowing up every day. And that wasn't really nice. So risk management was also good. Unfortunately, there are also problems. There are problems with Agile adoption. Organizations fail all over the world, trying to become agile. And this is what people reported as the biggest problems. An ability to change the organization's culture, or a general resistance to change, or the availability of people with the right skills. Support by management is often lacking. Managers think software development is something or agile is something that software developers do in their caves. And they don't help them, they don't support them. And then stuff about complexity and customers, etc., etc. Scaling. I think that these four are all management responsibilities. Change management, organizational culture is an outcome of how an organization is managed. Having people with the right skills, hey, that's a manager's job. Hiring the right people, usually. So this is all management stuff. Managers are the ones basically screwing it up. That's my conclusion. We want to be agile, but managers make a mess of it. That's a pity. Now, Peter Drucker is one of my favorite managers, management gurus. He wrote this a couple of decades ago. Management is about human beings. He already understood that a long time ago. Its task is to make people capable of joint performance. It's about people. And this is what organization is all about, and the reason that management is the critical determining factor. He predicted it. If you don't do management well, things will not work, because it is critical to manage the organization. But this is important. He said management is critical. He did not say managers are critical. So many managers think of themselves as being critical parts of the organization, right? That's not entirely true. Management is critical, the act of managing. So compare it with testing. Testing is crucial. All products should be tested, right? But do you need testers in your organization? That depends. That depends on how big your organization is, on how specialized testing needs to be. Maybe a team can do testing themselves as software developers. Maybe management can be done by everyone on the team, distributed management. So the job of management is important. It's okay if we have people specializing in it, we can call them managers. No problem there. It's their job to focus on it. As we have testers focusing on the testing. That's not a problem. So management is critical, but everyone is involved. That is what I keep saying. Everyone is partly responsible for management. So I came up with this strange looking management model. This is Marty, the management model. It is a bit strange because it is actually a monster. Marty, the management monster. Many people see managers as monsters. I'm afraid. All over the world, managers are monsters. Well, let's just accept that managers are monsters. But this is a friendly monster, right? This is Marty, the management monster. He wants to do good. And Marty has 6 eyes on the organization. And we're going to discuss all of them. Energize people, make sure that people are happy, motivated, and energized. Empower teams, make sure that they can self-organize. But also constrain self-organization so that they're going in the right direction. And then develop competence, because they will never get where they have to be if they are total idiots. So we have to help them along the way. Growth structure, maybe we have multiple teams that somehow have to work together, multiple customers, multiple projects, and improve everything. This is continuous improvement and change management, also a management job. But first, I want to discuss complexity thinking, because I believe having the right mindset is important in order to solve problems. And this is often looked over. All people skip over this when they deal with practices. People are often looking for the best practices for everything. And that's okay, but sometimes you have to know why things work. Why does Agile work so well? Well, I'm going to look at complexity science. This is a complex adaptive system, a team. It consists of parts. The parts work together. They form a system, the team, and the system shows complex behavior, which means it is hard to predict what they're going to do exactly. We can make estimates, but It's difficult. And they adapt. They can adapt to a changing environment. That is typical for all complex adaptive systems. Now there's a big body of knowledge, science around complex systems. And one conclusion that I picked up from one of these books is that complexity theory is about the dynamics of change in systems. That's interesting. You know what the fourth line of the Agile Manifesto is? No, sorry, yes, the fourth line. It's responding to change over following a plan. It's about change in environments and dealing with it. And another quote that I picked up is, it is a new theory of business that places people and relationships into dramatic relief. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. It's the first line of the Agile Manifesto. And both these quotes, this one and this one, are from before the Agile Manifesto. So it is for good reason that some people say Agile and complexity science is a marriage made in heaven. It's based on the science that says why it works. There are complexity researchers like Dave Snowden and Ralph Stacey and others. They are the complexity gurus, and they can explain why Agile makes sense, why it is actually common sense to be Agile, scientific. So there are a few insights, a few things that we can learn, that we picked up from science. One of them I find interesting is this one. Complexity is anti-methodology. It is against one size fits all. So that means anyone who is being dogmatic about any particular approach, like do Kanban because it is much better than Scrum, talks nonsense, because it depends on context. You cannot be dogmatic in any model with any perspective, because it always depends on the context, what you are talking about. So complexity is anti-dogmatic. Every weird solution has a place somewhere in the universe for it to be the best solution at that point in that place. Also means that you have to use multiple models, usually. I actually found research in software development industry where they found that the organizations who create their own processes, their own methods, are the ones that perform best. Interestingly enough, it works best when you start with a common method, like Scrum or Kanban. Start with the basics, as the books describe, and then start changing it. Change it to your own context. Start ripping it apart and combining it with other stuff until you have a very good method. And it looks like nothing like the original anymore, but who cares? It's yours now. It turns out there's scientific proof there, proof from research, that is the best approach. Another insight is anticipate, adapt, and experiment are the three ways of innovating by complex systems. Anticipation is looking forward, trying to look ahead. In Scrum we do this per sprint. Right? We look ahead and for one sprint, this is what we're going to do. Adaptation is looking backward, responding to feedback. We do that with a demo, with retrospectives. But often people forget about experimentation. That's the last one. Explore things. That's not really anticipating, it's also not really adapting, it's just looking at what's out there, like sending out a scout in unknown terrain. Go explore this before we send everyone there. Right? That is exploration. We have to do more of that. And I notice in the Agile world sometimes we forget about this. We do a lot of anticipation and adaptation. Alright, another insight, and then I will give you some practices. Another insight is that things co-evolve. We call it reflexivity, with a difficult term in science. Which means basically that the observer influences the system, and the system influences the observer. It goes both ways. And very often people don't realize that. And when they look at something, when they're simply observing, then they are already influencing what is going on by the way they are observing. In sociology, there's a name for it, they call it the Hawthorne effect. Has anyone heard of the Hawthorne effect? Nobody? It's the last century. They measured people in a factory and they tried to find out how to improve their performance. So they increased the lighting, for example, and then the performance went up. And then they tried dimming the lights, and improvement went up. And then they tried other things, and again, improvement went up. And they said, what's going on? And then it simply turned out that the people noticed that they were being measured. So improvement went up. They said, oh, we're getting attention. Oh, that's interesting. And then they started working faster, just because they were being measured. So the observer is always influencing what is going on. All right, so these are just a few examples of what complexity theory means. Another favorite of mine is they modeled complex systems on computers and try to find out what do they do most when they try to survive and innovate. What is the best way to innovate? And it appeared that the best way to innovate is steal ideas from others. That's what the systems did. That's what they did. They spent 95 or 98% stealing the best practices from the other systems. And only a small percentage was spent on real innovation, coming up with things that did not exist yet. Because it was the highest return on investment. So they steal in innovation and then tweak it a little bit. I sometimes call it the Microsoft approach, right? You take other people's innovation, you change it a little bit so that it fits your own context, and ta-da! Samsung did it as well. And look at what they achieved. It was a very, very good strategy. Alright, extrinsic motivation. Oh, sorry, energize people. That is the first part that we're going to focus on. First of the 6 views. That leads me to extrinsic motivation. How to motivate people. Many managers have the wrong approach to that. They give bonuses. They give bonuses to CEOs. $100 million you get if you try to make this organization better. Whether they succeed or not, they're going to get the money anyway. So that's not really working. Science says that it doesn't work. But they believe it. Well, we have that in software development as well. I've heard of teams that got rewards for fixing bugs. Oh, what happens? They're simply going to make more bugs. So they get more money for fixing more bugs. It has actually happened. There's a great story I heard of a call center where people had to handle a certain number of phone calls, and they had a target. You get punished if you do not reach your target of 100 calls per day or something like that. So what happens if a customer is on the line and complaining for too long? Oops, I dropped the call, sorry. And then the customer has to call again, of course, even angrier than before. And hopefully they arrive at another phone with your colleague, not you. And so you make your 100 calls. So this is extrinsic motivation. It doesn't work. Intrinsic motivation works. That is when the goal that you have is actually some reward. Like you want people to make a high quality product, then making a high quality product is intrinsically motivating. That means people will not cheat because they're going to cheat on themselves. Who wants to cheat on themselves? That makes no sense. So intrinsic motivation is important. I found some references in this book. Stephen Rice, he has this list of intrinsic motivators, basic desires, we call them. I crossed out a few because I think a couple of them are not really applicable in an agile context. Like the need for love and sex, I don't know. Not on the projects that I have been on, I can tell you. Where love and sex the main drivers. The need to raise children, haven't seen that happen on the projects that I've been on. So I crossed them out. That leaves us 9. But there's other research. The Handbook of Self-Determination. Interesting research. They said competence, autonomy, and relatedness are the 3 main drivers. Well, it turns out relatedness is social context. Autonomy is independence, and competence is a new one. I didn't have that yet, so I'm adding it. 10 intrinsic desires. Yay, I like the number 10. What a coincidence. All right. And then there's this book by Daniel Pink, Drive, very popular book. He says purpose, autonomy, and mastery. They're all on the list, so I think we got it covered. I reordered them a little bit, I shuffled them, so now I have this acronym that says Champ Frogs. I think it's a very cool term. I don't know what it means, but it's a very cool word. Champ Frogs, the Champ Frogs scale. So whatever you do, if you're a manager, you're always trying to figure out how are people intrinsically motivated by what we're doing here. And on my class today, I gave a story of introducing Scrum and somebody being very much against it, against Scrum, and I figured out that it was attacking his need to feel competent and his need for status. Because I wanted him to share his code with the other team members, but he was the best coder and he didn't want to share his high quality code with the other team members because that attacked his need for competence and status. So I tweaked it a little bit and I was able to get him along by saying, well, why don't you start a community of practice? And then you can lead the community of practice of code quality. He totally loved the idea. He totally loved it. And then he was in favor of Scrum. By a simple tweak that I did, because I understood, this guy needs to feel competent and he needs a feeling of status. Well, I can give that to him. So you always have to need what motivates people. All right, 60 degree of evaluation. This is another practice that falls in this domain, in this view. I did that in a very unorthodox manner. I got these boring HR forms from the HR department, lots of criteria like quality of code and communication and being on time, blah, blah, blah. So I said to my team, all right, let's have dinner and we're going to have drinks. And we have these forms, I have them printed and we fill them out together about each other. We have discussions, what do you think about the code quality of Jurgen's code? Somebody said, oh, this sucks. No, your code sucks. And then we had a great conversation over dinner table. It was a lot of fun, actually. And we converged with our opinions. And we filled out the forms, we signed them, and we shipped them off to HR. And we were happy, HR was happy, everyone was happy. It was the Agile way of filling out the 360 forms. Also a more respectful way. Of course, you need to have a trust and respect and be able to have a bit of fun with your team, to have an open conversation about this feedback. But if you have achieved that, then it can really work. It was one of the most useful nights that we had that year. Happiness index is another great practice. It is promoted by Jeff Sutherland, one of the two inventors of Scrum, for example. And Hendrik Nieberg, you may have heard of him before, he's another author. Just met him in Barcelona again last week. He's also using the happiness index in his organization in Stockholm, just to keep track of how happy people are. You don't need to know exactly what is going on, but you need to know if it looks like this is not good. So you have to start asking questions, because there's something bad going on. It gives you a signal. It's like a heartbeat, the heartbeat of the team. Social networks. I promoted the use of Twitter in my organization. It was very successful. We started following each other and then learned things about each other. What we did on the weekends. Oh, you redecorated your bathroom. How interesting. I did that last week. Blah, 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 blah. And conversations got started that otherwise never would have happened. That was fun. But no matter what you do, this is all about the people, about the person. Right? And behavior is a function of a person and his or her environment. That is what this formula says. It is not a real scientific formula, it is a metaphor. It's a metaphor by Kurt Lewin, a sociologist. And he said, even if you know everything about an individual, you still cannot predict what they're going to do in a certain environment with certain people around him or her, because that depends on the environment. All right, second part, empower teams. So now we have motivated people who love doing their jobs, I hope. then it is time for them to self-organize. And I refer to these two quotes from the book Out of Control by Kevin Kelly. He's a former editor of Wired magazine, and he said these complex systems typically they are more than the sum of the parts, and the extra stuff is distributed over the system. And usually governance has to be spread among all the parts. I like that concept. It reminded me of a quote by Mike Cohn, who's also famous in the Scrum world. He said, Scrum is micromanagement by the team. I like that. This management still has to take place, asking for status updates and giving each other goals, etc., etc. But we do that as team members with each other, instead of a manager asking it from each individual. So micromanagement is distributed. That is exactly what happens in complex systems, according to the science. In order to achieve that, we have to empower people. That means distributing control into the system, delegating authority. And for that, they have created these 7 levels of authority. People find it very, very useful. Because usually, people think that there are only 2 options. Either I do the work, or you do the work. And that's it. Well, that is a bit simplistic. It also makes managers reluctant to delegate work to teams because they feel out of control when they hand over responsibility to teams, and they don't want to feel out of control. But by having this model, it becomes easier. Because with level 1, that is still old-fashioned command and control, I would say. I'm going to tell you what my decision is. Level 2 is a bit more nuanced. In that case, I'm going to try to convince you. I made a decision, I'm trying to convince you that I made a good decision. Like I sold Scrum in my organization. I already decided. But I really did my best for everyone to believe in my vision. So I made an effort. And 3 is asking their opinion first. What do you think we should be doing? I'm going to make a decision, but I want you to tell me, and you, and then I'm going to weigh the results. It's like a judge sometimes. And then 4 is agreeing together. Let's decide, let's sit around the table and we're going to talk about this. Find a solution. And these 3 are the reverse of these 3. So in this case, I will tell a team, it's your decision, but I'm going to advise you. I think this is the best thing to do, but you decide. Right? But I really think you should be doing this. But again, your decision. So I'm trying to influence them naturally. That's the whole point. And then level 6 is the next step. Basically, I'm not trying to influence them, but I will observe, which will still be influencing them. I'm going to let them know that I am watching and I am asking, what did you do? What kind of sprint length did you choose? Oh, why did you choose 2 weeks instead of 1? Right? Just asking questions. Let them explain. I'm not going to say that they are bad decisions, or maybe I will, whatever, but I'm not going to turn them back, because then we would end up here again. No, it's your decision. Let them fail over this. Level 7 is full delegation. I don't even need to know. I trust you so much, I probably don't even understand it if you try to explain to me. So don't bother, go ahead. So this is 7 level, and this makes it easier, I notice, for managers to delegate, because sometimes you have to do it in a step-by-step fashion. Maybe go from level 2 to level 4, and then to level 5, and then make that visual. You can make it visual like this. Make it very, very clear to people. This is the way things are delegated. Like selecting team members. Who decides on team members? Well, it's on level 3. That means the manager decides, but the team gives input first on the team members that they want and that they don't want. And the manager decides. Okay. And then they can talk, okay, what is necessary for the teams to form themselves? That would mean moving the sticky note in that direction. I've suggested this and a number of teams have picked it up. I'm getting pictures sent to me of authority boards and spreadsheets being used, because apparently it's really helpful to visualize it. Otherwise people are so are wondering, okay, what decisions am I allowed to make here? Okay, those were examples of what you can do in this field. Then, align constraints, that's the next one. When people are self-organizing, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to do a good job. Self-organization is valueless, as the scientists say. It is not good or bad. Terrorism is also self-organization. Criminal behavior is self-organization. It is all self-organization. So somebody has to decide whether it's good or bad and try to steer it in the direction of good. That is what we have management for together. Make sure that it goes in the right direction. So, number of things that we have to do. For example, I always want people to think about goals, goal setting, and I don't want anyone to decide that their goal is more important than the goals of other people. This sometimes happens with Scrum teams, for example, where the product owner has a goal for the product, if you're lucky, because sometimes they don't even know what they're doing. But all right, they have a goal for the product, and then everything else is subject to that goal. The team cannot do anything else except deliver features for the product owner. This can be very, very demotivating for teams, because a team is more than just a feature delivering machine, right? So everyone has their goals, maybe making money or writing the best possible code or growing a career or whatever. We all have our goals. You know, of course, tomorrow morning we're going to talk about goal setting. One way to create goals is to do it in a visual way. Use metaphors, use pictures. That is much more interesting than mission statements. And I have a great story that I picked up in China where I was earlier this year. I did this course for a company in Qingdao. That's a huge company where they make white goods, refrigerators and air conditioning and things like that. And they told me the story of how the organization was nearly bankrupt 28 or 30 years ago. It was nearly bankrupt. And somebody was sent there, Mr. Jiang, who is now the CEO, he was sent there to try and save that company. And what he found was the quality was absolutely terrible, what they were making. Basically, most of the products did not work well. And there was a customer there bringing back the refrigerator because it didn't work, the thing that he had bought. So he made sure that all the products that were done and that were about to be sold were tested and checked, and they found that plenty of them didn't work. And he had them put all together. He got a sledgehammer, a couple of sledgehammers, and he told the workers in the factory to destroy them. And I thought, what? Because at that time, 30 years ago, that was like a year's worth of wages for a normal Chinese factory worker. Such a refrigerator, very costly machines for those people. And he told them to destroy them. He intentionally said that. I want you to destroy them. And he convinced them, and they smashed the refrigerators. And they still have one of those sledgehammers on display in the corporate museum, because all big Chinese companies have their own museums, right? Of their own history. It's amazing. So they have a sledgehammer there. And they're still telling that story. And now it is the best company in China with the highest quality machines. They are famous for it. They are the biggest producer of refrigerators in the world, bigger than Whirlpool and with higher quality. Why? Because they have Mr. Jiang. And if you make a bad product, Mr. Jiang will come with a sledgehammer and tell you to break it apart. Isn't that a great story? That's awesome. That's much more interesting than, yeah, we are committed to delivering high quality products to customers, yada, 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 yada. Who believes that? We have Mr. Jiang, right? With a sledgehammer. So, use stories. Stories as goal setting. pictures, video. This is a video, a picture that we made of the video of the Agile Lean Europe Network last year. European Network of Agilists and Lean Practitioners. Also, remember to communicate your goal. This is often what happens, what not happens in many organizations. People don't even know what the goal is. It's so silly. I was in a management team meeting. It was nearly Christmas, I remember, and one of the people in the room asked my CEO, what was the corporate value of the year again? And the CEO said something like, I don't know, technical excellence or something. And I thought, what? I'd never heard of the corporate value of the year. And I was Chief Information Officer. Notice the irony there, Chief Information Officer. I had never heard of it. Pretty high in the hierarchy. So apparently somebody failed in communicating something to the rest of the organization there. Goals do not work if nobody is able to tell you what they are. You should be able to ask any person at any time in the organization, what is our goal here? What are we trying to do? If the person can't answer the question, the goal will not help them self-organize. It is useless. Right? All right. That was goal setting and constraining self-organization. Now, development of competence. Difficult area. Because some people, frankly, are not good enough to actually move forward as fast as you want them to. Self-organization doesn't happen if you have a bunch of idiots on the team. All right, sorry, yeah, that's just the way it is sometimes, right? They have to improve their competence. So there's plenty of stuff available about that. You probably know about this, right? Shu Hari is a very well-known model in the Agile world. By the way, when I showed this in China in February, they started laughing. They started laughing. I didn't know what was going on, so I thought, what is the issue here? Well, it turns out that this is Japanese and this is Chinese. And they thought it was very funny. I don't get Chinese humor, by the way. They thought it was very funny. They probably thought, oh, this stupid foreigner mixing Japanese and Chinese. Here we go again. Something like that. Whatever. So these are Chinese characters. Later I learned that actually the Japanese also use the Chinese characters for Shu Hari, so there was nothing wrong here. Anyway, Shu Hari, that is the 3 levels of learning. Shu level is learning the basics, learning the basic ideas, the basic practices. Like when I was trying to learn how to ride a bicycle when I was, I don't know, 5 years old. The bicycle felt like this big that my parents had bought. I didn't know how to brake, so for at least a week I simply flung myself in the bushes when I needed to stop. My mother sat in the garden and she saw the bushes go like this. Oh, Jurgen is coming home. And then sometime later I learned how to brake. There was a Shu level of learning. And the Ha level is learning the exceptions. Like, even when the traffic light is green, it is smarter to stop when there's a car rushing by, right? That would be a smart thing to do. That's an exception to the rules. And then at the Re level, everything becomes natural. You don't even think about what you're doing. You listen to your iPod and you think about your work and you arrive at your destination and you think, what is that dead cat doing in my front wheel, right? That is the Re level of bicycle riding. So, we apply this to all kinds of professions. And sometimes I use this diagram where skill is something that we build over time. Shu Hari, it takes a lot of time. Some people say 10,000 hours. Malcolm Gladwell said that in one of his books. 10,000 hours to be a master at something, a master pianist. This can change from day to day. Discipline. Whether we pay attention or not. Are we motivated? Did we have a fight with our spouse this morning? Did the children keep us awake at night and things like that? That is all influencing our discipline. And if a surgeon forgets to wash his hands before operating, you still have a problem, even if he is very, very skilled. He's not being disciplined. So Professionalism is here. You're both skilled and disciplined in your behavior. Now, there are different approaches to development of competence. I learned that the hard way, I'm afraid. What we did in my organization was, well, we did some training and certification, and we had a bit of supervision and control, which basically means people walking around and helping, doing the Gemba walk, as we say, checking if people are really applying Scrum well, and that was it. We did not have coaches and mentors, which is basically really what you should have. You should have coaches and mentors in your organization. And we did not use, we did not have the right culture, a culture of self-development. That is perhaps the hardest thing to grow. Another thing that I want to refer to is metrics. It often pops up. How do you measure if you're actually going forward? These are 3 tips that I learned from metrics that I find useful. Whenever you measure something, and measuring things is good, can be really useful. Whenever you measure something, it has to relate to somebody's goal, to the stakeholder's purpose. What exactly are you trying to achieve? It sounds very common sense, right? But very often this doesn't happen. And second, the measurement has to improve an aspect of the system. And third, it is part of the metric should be part of the work of those who are interested in it. I'll give you an example. Is velocity a good metric? Well, yes, because velocity is related to the goal of teams, which is sustainable pace. One of the goals of software teams is to be able to go on indefinitely at a similar pace. That is what they want. Does it help them improve? Yes, it will help them improve estimates and then estimating how much they can do per sprint. Is it part of the work of those who are interested in it? Yes, because the Scrum team themselves create the velocity, they measure it, and they plot it in the chart, so that makes sense. Another example, what about timesheets? Ooh, dangerous area. What if you ask people to fill out the number of hours that they work every day? Well, what is the purpose here? Who wants it? If the purpose is simply checking if people are really working 40 hours per week, that makes no sense. Because anyone can cheat, there's no real stakeholder's purpose, there's no stakeholder of the organization is really interested in that. But if it is about finding out which customers are profitable and which customers are not, if you have a time and material based organization, for example, or something similar, yeah, that makes sense. Then you need to know which unprofitable customers to kick out. And it helps you improve, but the key problem then is you're asking everyone to fill out the hours on projects while most of them are not interested in it, because only accounting and top management is interested in the results. So you want the results of the metric and you let them do the work of producing the data. Well, then it goes wrong, because they don't care and they will simply say, oh, 8 hours, whatever. Well, actually it was 4 hours customer X and 3 hours customer Y and 2 hours this and 1 hour that, and also, but that's far too complicated, so I just write 8. And then the data becomes useless. So anyone who wants to have a metric basically should measure themselves. That's what it means. All right. One example that I use in this part is this balanced scorecard, but then in a new version. This is typical practice that has been tweaked to a new context. As the balanced scorecard is a typical management 2.0 approach. Very good idea, but bad architecture. It applies to the command and control hierarchies. If you tweak it a little bit, you say, okay, these are the stakeholders, these are the people interested in what in my complex system. They are around it, so to speak. The employees and the organization, the managers, suppliers, the local community, and they all want something out of what I'm doing, and you make different measurements to see if you're delivering what they want from you. That's like a balanced scorecard, but a little bit different. So you still make a few metrics. but you try to take into account stakeholders of a complex system. We're going to practice with that tomorrow again in the course. All right, nearly there. Growth structure. Growth structure. As I said, I see organizations as complex systems, and part of complexity science is chaos theory. It's one of the many parts of the complexity sciences. And chaos theory was very popular in the 80s, I remember it well because I was studying at the university at that time, studying computer science, and it was in the same building as mathematics. And the mathematicians were in love with fractals at that time. They had just been discovered, that was in the 80s, so they kept drawing fractals everywhere. And this is a typical, very simple fractal. It scales endlessly. No matter at which level you look, it looks the same. Fractals are very natural. We see them in the natural world all around us. Like mountain ranges have a fractal structure. And blood vessels have a fractal structure. Why? Because it is very, very simple to encode. It takes only a few instructions, mathematical instructions to encode. While at the same time they're very efficient. The most efficient way to distribute blood in the human body with a fractal structure of blood vessels. So, very useful. So, the organizational theorists are always trying to find out what are the fractal ways of growing organization, because it's the most efficient and it scales endlessly. We saw scaling as one of the problems in one of the earlier slides of Agile. I'm going to skip this one. Sorry, no time. This one is more interesting, I found. Because one thing that I noticed is when I was in my organization a couple of years ago, I was manager of a couple of Scrum teams, and what worked really well is when other teams, like the system administrators, saw us as their customers. So the Scrum teams basically could decide whether or not to use their services. And they provided various source control platforms, for example. Source Safe, SVN, what do you have, Git, whatever. We could do multiple things, depending on the projects that we were working on. And we could decide for ourselves whether or not to use them. On my last project, we didn't use any of them. We used one from the cloud that was available for free, just as an experiment. It was our decision. And that was cool because it was sort of a marketplace internally. They had to prove that their offer was better than anything else we could get elsewhere. And it was similar with the design department, for example. We had a design department that was very professional in creating websites, award-winning websites they created, and we could decide here whether or not to use their services. But we had some basic design skills on the teams themselves as well. That was okay. Sometimes not every website had to be like award-winning. So we decided here whether to use their services, or sometimes we use a freelancer. We hired a freelancer. That was up to the team and the product owner to decide. It worked well because we created a marketplace. And one of the most fascinating places was that company Hire I just told you about with Mr. Jang and the Sledgehammer. He is very innovative because he also created a giant marketplace as one company. Because Hire is 60,000 people and they consist of 2,000 units. They all collaborate and compete with each other. They have multiple HR departments. They have multiple system administrative departments, multiple marketing departments. And these have to try and deliver services to the others, to do the production work. And if the HR department is not delivering good resources, if I may call them that, and not helping the people that develop them, they simply break up the contract and sign a contract with another one. That's so cool. It's a market. China was the last place on earth where I expected the market in the company, where the companies in Europe and the US are usually have more a communist approach, right? Top down. It's very strange. So I call them value units, marketplaces of teams that work with each other. All right. Last part, improve everything. Slightly more than 15 minutes, but I'm sure you don't mind. This is about change management. This is a big topic. I noticed that different Agile conferences, change is the big thing right now because it is so hard to change organizations. So many speakers are speaking of organizational change and transformation. I see it as follows. I see it as having 4 parts. First of all, you have to be a systems thinker. You really have to understand that you're trying to change a system. Not just individual people, but it is a system with connections in between, and that makes it sometimes really hard. If you poke the system, it will poke back. And you will have to try out, and you have to experiment. And one writer, one systems thinker calls it dance with the system. I love that metaphor. So you dance with the system. You want that system to change and move over there, but it will never be a straight path. So you start dancing with it. And if you're a good dancer, you're able to move in that direction. If you're a bad dancer, you end up somewhere else. You just have to practice dancing. And that is being a change agent, is being a good dancer. A dancer with a system. A great metaphor. And there's a model for that is PDCA. Plan, do, check, act, inspect and adapt, build, measure, learn. They're all different versions of the same idea. Do things iteratively. The second part out of the 4 is you have to consider the individuals. Yes, the people are all different. They are different human beings. And they're not really rational sometimes. Well, there's a model for that too. It's called ADPAR. It consists of 5 parts. And the problem is, usually, when we're trying to convince other people that they have to change their behaviors, we're only trying to create awareness. But we're forgetting about all the other parts. One of them is, for example, desire. Why should I care? Is the next question. You have to answer that question. And also knowledge. I don't know how. And ability. I know how, but I can't. Something is holding me back. I'd love to have to go in that direction, but I can't. Because I have this legacy platform or whatever. There's always excuses. And sometimes they can and they move forward, but they fall back into old habits. They can't keep up. And that is reinforcement. That is changing the change so that people are able to keep up. So there's an entire model about that. The third part is seeing it as a network, a social network. It's like injecting a virus. And you want that virus to spread. It is a beneficial virus. You want everyone to copy that good behavior. There's a model for that too. It's called the adoption curve by Rogers. Very famous model about innovation and change. Basically says you have different kinds of people, from the innovators, early adopters, to the majority and the laggards. And you have to understand which part am I addressing now? Where am I with my change effort? I know with my courses, for example, that I still have innovators and early adopters. I do not have the majority yet. I know my approach will have to change in order to get the majority to my courses. Right? But at least I think about it. That's important. I realize that that is something to solve. Last part is consider the environment. It is a self-organizing system, and sometimes you can tweak the boundary. There's a Nobel Prize winner, Ilya Prigogine. He won a Nobel Prize. He was a professor in Brussels, and he discovered that self-organization cannot exist without boundaries. The boundary basically determines how the system will self-organize. So if you tweak the boundary, you get different results, is the idea. So why not change the environment instead of changing the people? Well, there's a model for that too. It's called the 5 I's. 5 different ways of changing the environment. And then let self-organization do its job. For example, information radiators. We know all about that, right? Just broadcast the status to people. This is how we want things to be, and this is your status. Now you figure it out. Or identity. That is the corporate identity or the team identity. And let peer pressure do its work for you. Incentives, rewards and punishments, they can work sometimes. infrastructure, that is the physical infrastructure to play with, the walls and the floor, etc. And institutions, formal institutions or communities of practice or anything around people that can help them change their behaviors. So, this was quickly an overview of Management 3.0 in slightly more than 15 minutes. 6 organizational views that I believe are all based on, inspired by complexity thinking, complexity science. And I also have this little book, just released 2-3 months ago, How to Change the World. And that describes the last part, because the last part is not really described in the Management 3.0 book, so I created this one. And I have promised to send per month, every month, a couple of free copies to anyone who sends me this word to my email address. But not everyone, I have a limited amount, so it will be a draw, right? So write down this email address and this word, and if you send that email, you'll have a chance of winning this free book. And we will draw every month. Just send the word booklets to Jurgen@noah.nl. About a couple dozen to give away. All right. You can find all that stuff, all that crap on slideshare.net. Jurgen Appelo. You can find me on Twitter. I have a blog, noah.nl. You might have heard about, and all these resources and some games, etc. You can find on management30.com. And that's it. Does anyone have a question or a comment about this? Something that bothers you or that you want to know more about? Yeah.
Typically when an organization starts small, then typically everyone knows each other, management is quite fine, and typically when organizations or everyone wants to grow big, and so when it's rapidly growing bigger, so typically management gets screwed up.
Yes.
So do you have any recommendations about that? And so how not to screw it up or not to grow or
Very good question. There are some famous examples of companies experimenting with new ways. I think the most famous one is W.L. Gore, where they have decided that each unit will not grow bigger than 150 people, more or less, 200, 150 people, because they want them to remain small companies. And having the company grow means simply creating a new office somewhere else where they will have no more than 150 people. So they will still feel small. I have people I know at Spotify. I'll probably go to the Spotify office again in Stockholm, where I am on Thursday. And they are experimenting with tribes. I talked with Joachim Sunden just yesterday about how far they are. And he said, well, we do not have departments, we call them tribes. It sounds like a subtle difference, but it is important, because we don't want departments that sound like hierarchy. Right? We want to have an organic approach to growing the organization. That means we have a number of tribes, and you're part of a tribe. And the tribe itself has squads. It doesn't have teams, it has squads, like military squads. They have a purpose, a goal. And people within a tribe, they can move from squad to squad, whatever they want. If you move to another tribe, that's okay. That means you will get another manager, because it basically becomes another sub-organization. So there's a lot of experimentation going on. And the Chinese company I told you about, they have 2,000 units of about 30 people each, between 20 and 40 people. And the CEO says to all those managers, because every unit has a manager, try to be your own CEO. They can decide on who they hire, on what kind of products they make, on where they want to deliver, etc., etc. They're all little units. Of course, there are constraints. You have to put some constraints in place, but there's a lot of experimentation going on. But, as I said in the beginning, you cannot be dogmatic. There's no one size fits all. That would be against complexity thinking. So I can't give you the solution. I can tell you, you have to experiment. That is complexity thinking. Experiment, see what works for you, but do steal the ideas of the other. And and see what works for you. Okay, other questions?
Can you show the bit of slide once more?
The slide for the free book?
Yeah.
This one. All right. Another question. That was a great question. Another question.
There was on the first eye of the marquee and energizing people. There was the table with the happiness index.
Yeah.
Can you please comment on this? How you can measure happiness index without people are noticing it?
Without people?
Noticing it, because
Oh, you can't. No. The whole point is that people report their happiness.
simply as
Yeah. I'm happy, or I'm not, or on a scale of 1 to 5. And that seems to work for a number of organizations, at least for a period of time, until it doesn't work for them anymore. Well, then stop doing it. Right? It works for the time being. But basically, you ask people to rate their happiness per day. You can simply do it. Well, before you leave, put a dot somewhere on this line. How happy were you today? And I've seen teams. I've just been to a team in Rotterdam where they have a blackboard and they have chalk markers and they measure it per person. And you see a wonderful picture emerging on the walls with things going up and down and collectively and individually. It's very fascinating. And they make it public so everyone knows who was happy and who isn't. So we have a collective responsibility of doing something about it. If somebody's not feeling happy, I think that's a wonderful thing. But the danger is, and I'm thinking about that, that after a while it gets boring, right? Yeah, I'm happy, and I'm happy again. Yeah, still nothing changed, still happy and happy. So nothing much is improving. There's no way of going beyond 5, for example. And the experts in metrics say that actually relative measurements are better than absolute measurements. Because with a relative measurement, you can always do better than yesterday. And with the absolute measurement, you cannot do better. After 5, you cannot do better than 5. You can only go down after 5. So I'm thinking about that. There should be a way that is even better than the happiness index, but I haven't cracked that nut yet. All right. Other comments, questions?
Well, I've got
Yeah. Okay.
You're one of the organizers of the Agile network, and it was the previous week.
Yeah. Yes, the Barcelona.
Of this year. Can you tell something about what will happen in the next year?
Yes and no. Yeah. Because yes, I was one of the people who came up with the idea of organizing the Agile in Europe network, and that motivated a lot of people. Yeah, let's start doing things together in many countries. And, last year we had a conference in Berlin. It was a great success, and we also had a conference that was a second one, an unconference officially in Barcelona. And one of the topics was, okay, what's next? What shall we do? Because there's so much else to do. And the conclusion was, well, there are plenty of people that are motivated. They should get things started, because I'm not going to do it for them. Right?
You declare it.
Exactly. So I am simply waiting. I'm simply waiting and keep telling people so, asking so, what are you going to do now? Right? Reminding them. But I did see activity, and I did see people asking for the next one. Where is the next one going to be? Well, I'm not going to decide. Somebody's going to decide, but this is a great experiment in self-organization. Who will decide where the next conference will be? Well, that depends on who wants to organize it. Maybe people in Riga will come forward, I don't know. Maybe people in Budapest or Stockholm, whatever. Somebody hopefully will claim the honor of organizing the next one. And then things will start happening. And people will pop up and start helping.
And what about kind of small advice to move all this network to some kind of direction? So they should self-organize in everything. That's about the example of this morning's training.
Yeah, well, we had great discussions last week in Barcelona about the purpose for the network and what is the business model of the network, and basically the conclusion was that we don't agree. And that's okay. Because somebody said, and he had a very good point, you're still very young. You cannot expect after 1 year to be a mature, self-organizing system. You're still discovering your own identity. And that's fine. Go on discussing and not agreeing and whatever. You will figure it out. And I thought, yeah, that's a good point. You do not expect a young baby to have a clear, fully formed identity after such a short time. So we will keep discussing. And I'm sure there will be a next conference. And then after a while, things will settle down and probably there will be a more clearer vision than we had so far. But at least people are active and energized. I heard people, they want to start a monthly digest, and then they want to do this and they want to do that, and okay, great, let's see if they actually do it. So we're not there yet, but at least things are happening, that's nice.
What about general areas participation in their own network?
And what about which participation?
Agile aliens.
Agile aliens participation. Well, they really need to be invited, I know, because people from other non-agile lean domains don't naturally go to an agile lean conference. So you really have to get them and invite them as keynote speakers, for example. But I heard some people were very focused on we should get more aliens, like psychologists or sociologists or whatever, to the conference. But then I think, well, I'm an agilist and I also do not go to a sociologist conference or a psychological conference. Why should I? That's another domain. It could be interesting. But if they invite me as a keynote speaker, then I will go. No problem. So I think we have to look in terms of speakers who are really invited, and you have some good ideas there. Come tell us about it. I think that works. All right.
You gave us an example of Chinese company that have multiple units of similar purpose.
Yeah.
Do you have such example from European company or US company?
Do I have? I do not have any examples of multiple HR departments and multiple marketing departments. The Chinese company is the only one where I saw that. There might be others. I did read about some innovative companies in Gary Hamel's latest book, What Matters Now. Gary Hamel's like the #1 management guru in the world. He knows about everything that's going on, it seems. And he had some very interesting examples, like Morningstar is a tomato producing company in the US, and they basically don't have management there. They have like a few constraints, and what happens is anyone who is part of the company, they can decide for themselves what they want to do. But they're all entrepreneurs, just a company full of entrepreneurs, and you will have to create your own contracts with people who want to use your services. So if you want to make tomato ketchup, then there are others who probably want to sell that ketchup to stores. Then you'll have to sign a contract with the person who wants to sell that ketchup, your ketchup, to the stores. And so there are lots of contracts being made in that company, all between individuals and groups. And that sounds like very inefficient, right? My God, so many contracts. But Gary Hamel says what they basically have is they have all these workers, but they do not have a pyramid. They totally got rid of the whole pyramid. Now that is a cost saving, I can tell you. Because usually those people earn much more. And they don't have them. They just have self-organizing, competing and collaborating entrepreneurs, all under the same name, Morningstar, where they produce tomato products. So I don't know exactly how human resources works, for example, but I think they don't even have HR, because basically anyone can join as long as they're able to sign a contract with other people. Then you become part of the company. So also very innovative, very interesting concept. But it is again a marketplace basically that they are creating. You have a question?
Yes, okay. Let's see further.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, you're all lean and agile, but how do you organize your own life? What are the boundaries you have?
Oh.
It's an interesting topic.
Ooh, it's a dead lady.
Was it you who
Personal management.
Personal Kanban? Was it you who wrote about personal Kanban?
Yeah. Because I was, I will tell you honestly, I use GTD, getting things done. It works quite well for me. I think it's pretty agile. Because every Sunday night I go through all my little projects, like I have project speaking, I have project training, I have project writing next book, I have all these projects. And I go through these projects and I reprioritize what I think is important for the next week. I do that on Sunday night. And then I can ignore everything else. So just focus on this week. And of course things will change during the week. That's okay. And that works, but one thing that frustrated me, and I do that with Remember the Milk, by the way, I can show you on my phone. One thing that frustrates me is that there's no statuses per task. It's only done or not done, right? It's just two columns basically. Nothing is really in progress or moved from the left to the right. And you have that with personal Kanban. So I have been asking online, does anyone know a personal Kanban tool that I can use on my phone and my Galaxy tablet and on my computer, and it seems it doesn't exist, basically. So I have to wait. The only one that's out there is for iPhone, and all other tools, they only work on PCs or only when you're online, but I travel all the time. I need to be able to do it on a plane or in other countries, not roaming, because that would be very expensive. So I haven't solved the personal Kanban stuff yet. So it's still with it, it's work, it's okay.
I mean, with the GTD, do you really have limits on your sort of iterations you try to do? As you started, you try to finish it like within 30 minutes. Time limit and everything? No, but that sounds like Pomodoro, what you... It's close.
Yeah, well, I don't use the Pomodoro approach. It seems to work
for mixing things up.
Yeah, because Remember the Milk, getting things done is for the macro scope, right? You have projects that they take weeks or months to complete. I mean, it could be building a house or whatever. That is the big scope. And then Jim Benson of Personal Kanban said, for example, the next level underneath is Personal Kanban, where you do per week like status updates and bring things to closure. And then the next smaller level is the Pomodoros, per day. That is timing 25 minutes, be focused, and then break. And after 5 minutes, be focused again for 25 minutes, and then you have a break. Well, I found out I hated it. I found it very annoying. I think the Pomodoro approach works for people who have trouble with focusing, who have phone calls going on and answer emails and all that stuff, and they have to focus for 25 minutes, and they find it very hard. I have no problems whatsoever focusing. I have a problem defocusing. I am very focused on my work. I forgot an appointment a week ago because I was so focused on my work, I was so absorbed that after 2 hours I emerged in the real world again. Whoops! I thought I had an appointment and I missed it. So Pomodoro, I hated that after 25 minutes the sound started ringing. You need to have a break. No, I don't want to have a break. I want to finish this. Cool.
Do you have a place for project managers in self-managing teams, according to your model?
Do we have a place for project managers in self-organizing teams? I think there is a place. Yes, I think there is a place, but different from what it was before, I'm quite sure. because the Scrum Master has taken over part of the responsibilities of what traditional project managers would see as their job, which is fine. But Scrum Masters usually do not deal with complicated interdependencies between projects, between software and infrastructure, and hardware, and all that kind of stuff. I've been in the office of a project manager in Norway, in Oslo, where at Cisco Systems they create hardware, audio-visual equipment, and he was a project manager managing or being responsible for the projects of a number of self-organizing teams, and some of them were software teams, some of them were hardware teams. He had to make sure everyone worked together, because there are physical constraints and digital constraints, but everything was done in an agile way. It was very fascinating to see. He was totally into agile. He really believed it, but there was a place for a person like that, because Scrum Master would not be doing what he would be doing, because he also had meetings with the board, for example, because the board wants roadmaps, and customers want to know, okay, when is this product going to be released? And Scrum Masters are not going to tell you. Teams are not going to tell customers, like, okay, these features we're going to expect by the end of the year in this product. Marketing needs to know, because the marketing machine has to be started 3 months before a product is released. And this is all stuff that the project manager can deal with. So he shields basically the agile teams who can focus on Scrum and Kanban, do whatever they want. He shields them from the real bad world out there, who make demands and who ask for dependencies. Television commercials have to be produced because of the products that are still in development. So what is the likeliness that this feature will be the product or not? And all that kind of stuff. So yes, there is a role, but not in every organization, I would say.
But he, project manager, puts himself in hard situation when giving a promise to the board without having a promise from the team.
Yeah, but good project managers are able to manage those risks. Like there's this probability, given the velocity that the teams have and their estimates of the remaining features, there's this probability that this feature will be in the product or not. And that means that this should not be in a television commercial, this we can do in television commercial, because we're pretty sure that this feature will be in it. And even if not, then we make a backup commercial where the feature is not being showcased. All that kind of stuff. It's all risk management that project managers do. And it sounded very sensible, his job that he had. He called it his war room. He had all these whiteboards he had with velocity and the burn down charts on various teams. But he also had his Gantt charts. And he said, I'm not showing this to any of the teams, but I do need my Gantt charts for the outside world. Because they need the Gantt charts. They have the burn down charts are useless for the rest of the world. So he simply converted that back and forth. Okay, so he had a role. All right.
Okay.
One last question, or that's it?
I guess that's it.
He decided that's it. That's management. That's man. This is the real manager. That's level 1. Tell, you know. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.